Cornerstone of this building, to be called the Holy Trinity Church, was laid on the 19th of August 1893 by the then governor and commander-in-chief of the armed forces so far as the Gold Coast colony was concerned, in the person of His Excellency Sir William Brantford Grace, during the 57th reign of Her Most Gracious Majesty Victoria, whom was called Queen Empress. And the springing up of the church, after a year, the church was built and then dedicated in the year 1894 and became the Cathedral Church of the Most Holy Trinity. This housed the seat of the diocesan bishop of the Anglican Diocese of Accra, and by way of constitution, the bishop appoints the dean to be the administrative head of the cathedral. The cathedral witnesses the canonization of any priest who attains the rank of a canon in the order and automatically joins the chapters of the cathedral. And on this holy grounds, we have witnessed the consecration of diocesan bishops. Historically, we will be witnessing the consecration of a suffragan bishop elect come 30th January 2022. These clues might make you know my personality better.
Hello there. I told you I'll be introducing my guest to you right after it, and I'm here in the offices of my guest. Some few months ago, that is somewhere in 2021, September, he was elected as the suffragan bishop for the Anglican Diocese of Accra, and soon to be consecrated. From the day I'm doing this interview and the day to be ahead, we have some about 3 days to his consecration as suffragan bishop of the Accra Diocese. And he also happens to be the current dean. Until he is being consecrated, he is the dean of the cathedral. We saw him being installed as the 8th dean of the Cathedral Church of the Most Holy Trinity, Anglican Diocese of Accra, in the early days of January 2020. He's a man of long standing. I would not want to burst the bubbles of introducing a lot of his laurels, but in the course of the conversation, you know who he is. I have with me the very Reverend Dr. George Kotei Neequaye. Hi, Dean. How are you doing?
Hi, thank you.
Dean, I think that this interview is long overdue. I think it's supposed to have been right after the election, but the year and there, at long last, we are here. Happy New Year, I would say to you, sir.
Happy New Year to you too.
And then thank you. Have my warm congratulations to your election as suffragan bishop. I would have that conversation probably the latter part of it. But tell us who George Kotei Neequaye is. Where you grew up from, life growing up, your education, and then we'll take it from there.
I was born on 25th March 1959 at Accra, St. Mary's. And I grew up actually in that particular area. In fact, Bukom was our playing ground.
You don't look it though.
Boxing ground. So, and we spent a lot of time also at the sea, swimming and helping with so many things. But as I grew up from the primary school, I looked around me. I was very small. I was maybe about 4 or 5 years thereabouts. I realized that I actually lived in poverty. It rains and you are putting pans all over the place. You're hearing I don't know where the determination came from, but I was determined right from the beginning to learn very hard. And so even when I was in primary school, I was studying through the night, and I grew up with my grandmother. In fact, when I was born, within 6 months of my birth, the marriage broke down. My mother married another person who later became a priest of the Anglican Church.
Wow.
Canon Selwyn Silvanus, Aite Koto Okai, SSA Okai.
Okay. That is the child they had, or your stepfather?
That's my stepfather.
Okay.
And so,
because the name rings a bell with the current
yes,
canon.
It was in St. Mary's.
Okay.
When he retired.
Oh yeah.
But he was a father to me. When the marriage broke down, I was given to my grandmother. It was much easier at that time because I wasn't feeding on the breast. They gave it to me. I didn't like it, and so it was much easier to leave it to my grandmother.
So they call you Mobi by then?
Well, yes. So I grew up under my grandmother. One of the things that I remember when I was even a child was that I didn't want any child to come near me. I wanted to play alone. And so when any child is rolling towards me, they will shout, Amole, because I'm going to give the child a blow. I didn't want anyone near me. I wanted to be alone. And so I grew up like that under my grandmother. I remember in primary school, secondary school, I used to go to friends to try and get books from friends to read. And so most of the time during vacations especially, I was inside reading. All the vacation I spent inside reading storybooks after storybooks, and then I'll send them and then take another set. And so that was my life. Even though I had also an outside life. In fact, my outside life in terms of fighting, and I was most of the time fighting for people. I didn't like anybody to be cheated. And so when I realized that anybody is being cheated, I go in and fight for the person. My grandmother didn't know this side of me. When I was at home, even when I did something and my uncle wanted to beat me, he said, no. Even my uncle at times looked at my face and said, look, I can't beat this boy. So I was so gentle and innocent, and yet when I go out, I was a terror. And I remember one day I was coming from school near the Wesley, then there was the cemetery
area.
We jumped at the other side into the cemetery, even though they didn't want us to. And so most of the time the watchman would run after us and would jump over the wall, etc. One day I was coming like that, and there was this lady, young lady who said, all of a sudden I will beat you. Where is this coming from? And then she was pushing me. I didn't want to do it, but she actually pushed me to the wall that I decided I must fight
back.
And then whilst I was fighting her, all her sisters, about 4 of them, were all beating me. So when we were growing up, we were taught something in terms of fighting, that there's no pain. So even when you receive a blow and you fall down, you have to get up and keep going. No pain. And so whilst they were beating me, I was concentrating on the girl, and all the blows went to her. I went home. My grandmother didn't know anything, but the following day, they walked into the house with this lady, swollen face, and they said to my grandmother, I did it. And she said, no way, my son will never be able to do this. He will never do it. So they were insisting that I did it. So she called me. from the room and asked me, look, they said you beat this person, what is it? And I said, yes, I did it. And this was the reason why I actually did it.
She received the shock of her life.
She received the shock of her life. She didn't say anything. She sends this girl to school, to hospital, in and out almost every morning until things settled down. And then when things settled down, she called me. And then she said to me, give me your right hand. So I gave her my right hand. She said, you see, this is an illiterate. When my report came at that time, I read my own report. You couldn't read it. She said, look, you see there is a bone running through your hand. Those who have this bone, they don't fight people because they are very strong. And so don't ever fight anyone anymore. But that was almost the end of my fighting career. But she just talked to me rather than beat the hell out of me and then left me. But really talked to me and told me why I should not be fighting anymore. And actually, most of the fight was for somebody. I remember I went to the other time we always had to go and fetch water. I was passing by and then I heard some commotion at the pipe, a pumping pipe. I went there and then there was this guy, they said he always will come and do it. He will come and then push everybody around.
So if gets his access,
get his water and then go away. So I told him, look, you can't do this to these people. He said, look, who are you? I'll beat you. I said, you beat me? All right, okay, then let's fight. And I gave it to him. Everybody was very happy that this tormentor
has been dealt with finally.
The same area where this happened, there was a certain house. They had a dog, and they were selling all kinds of things, banana, tomato, all kinds of things in the house. Anytime people went there, the dog beat somebody. So I went there. I decided, look, this dog must stop what it is doing. So I went there with a cane and then walked into the house. And the dog started barking and rushing at me. And I gave the dog a big whip. The dog barked and then went away. Now, so that was my life. I was all the time looking out to fight for people. And so when I became a Christian, I said to myself, this time you are going to fight for Jesus Christ.
Amen. I'll come into your ministry. Looking at how growing up became, if not for grandma's kind words or words of wits, if I will call it, man, I probably have seen you to follow DK Poison and become a boxer, whatever be the case. But when we come and look into your academic life, you became exposed with education. You studied at the UK, you were in Victoria, among other places that you've studied. To the extent that you've become a scholar, visiting scholar in some universities in the US, among other places too as well. How did you find your feet for education? Because we've seen a background that it was a poor background. Yes, still, this is where you find yourself. How did it all happen?
Yeah, as I said earlier on, I didn't know where the inspiration came from. It may be God controlling the way as I grew up. But I loved studying and reading. I remember when I was in primary school in Ayalolo, one primary school. There was this girl who, between the two of us, one will be first today, the other will be first tomorrow. And each time my report came, I had to look because my grandmother couldn't read anything. So I had to look at the report and decide that, look, I didn't do well here, I must do well here, etc. And so my energy comes from God, I think. And so I continued like that from Alolo Primary School 1 Then in the middle of it, I went to CP1 primary school. And then when I finished CP1 primary school, I went to CP2, Mamprobi, near St. Francis.
St. Francis, yeah.
And then from there, I went to Ebenezer Secondary School. You realize that in Mamprobi, so my actually area of study was all centered around Accra and Mamprobi. And so from Mamprobi Secondary School, I did science, pure science, and I wanted to be.
Is that what you used to call Ebenezer Secondary School?
Ebenezer Secondary School.
Okay, yeah.
Ebenezer Secondary School. I did science. I wanted to be a doctor, a medical doctor. But then along the line, people started telling me, you look like somebody God wants to use in the ministry, etc. And so when it became too rampant, I went in prayer to God and told God, look, all right, I'm hearing what is going on, but let me go on and be a medical person, and then when all is done, I will turn and serve you in the ministry. And so it went on like that, but there was one day, then this had finished my secondary school, and I was preparing to go to
the university,
do my A-level.
A-level, okay.
And I was walking on the street one day, one of these streets, and then somebody walked up to me. I didn't know the person from Adam, and that was the last time I saw the person. Walked to me and said to me that it looks like God is calling me into ministry. And if I didn't give in, nothing will be right for me. And so as a result of that threat, if you like, from God, I was a strong spiritual union person. And so as a result of that, I decided, look, it's about time I turn to the ministry. So right from secondary school, I went into school, theological school. Now, when my stepfather, Canon SSA got the wind that I have been called into ministry, he called me quickly and said, look, I want you to go to Trinity Theological Seminary and come to the Anglican Church. But then I was praying and asking God, where do you want me to go? Because it just came, I made a decision out of the blue, and so I wanted to know exactly what God wanted me to do. And then I had a lady into a Pentecostal theological school, Hope Institute of Theology at North Carolina. And so my stepfather was very disappointed that I didn't come to the Anglican Church. I'd gone to a Pentecostal theological institution. But then it was a 2-year course, diploma in biblical studies. When I was getting to the end of the course, all my colleagues there had come from churches. I had just gone in because I felt God was leading me into it. And so I started praying where God wanted me to go. Then I was worshiping with Assemblies of God in the Baptist Church at Circle, then Assemblies of God at North Carolina, Harry Seidu. And so I was praying, God, where do you want me to go? Even in the prayer, my mind was gearing towards either the Baptist Church or the Assemblies of God. Then the message came, and the message says, I want you to go back to the Anglican Church. This was a sermon. I want you to go back to the Anglican Church to give life to the Bible. Now, even then, the Lord be with you, and we were speaking in tongues and all those things.
Joshua was there. Yes.
The rest,
it was not found in the church.
Yes, I really didn't want to. And then there was a function at the Baden Powell. You know, those days there were a lot of functions, Christian functions, and I came to one. And then the preacher, a Hawili, the one who actually went into politics, he was preaching. And then he suddenly said, there is somebody among you, large crowd, somebody among you, God is calling the person into his church and is resisting. And I want to tell that person a story. He said, and I'll never forgot him, a little girl was sent to buy clay with him. And then as the girl was going, the money fell in the dark. The girl saw the light. And so she went into the light looking for the money. And so somebody came by and said, what are you doing here? What are you looking for? She said, I'm looking for my money. I've been sent to buy clay. And then the person said, it's light, there's money here, you can find it. So where did the money fall down? And then she said, oh, out there in the dark. She said, then go back to the dark and look for the money there. And then he ended it up there and said that, look, the one God is calling to be a light to the church that he's calling him into. And when I heard that, I decided it was about time I came back to the Anglican Church. In fact, I started in St. Mary's. I grew up just opposite St. Mary's. I started in St. Mary's. In fact, when I started as a boat boy, I didn't have dress to go to church with. And so on Fridays, I will, at times Saturdays, I will go to my cousin at Makobi and then borrow a dress, use it on Sunday, and then wash it and send it back. And I kept doing that back and forth. Very young. But I was determined that I must go to church. And so I grew up like that in the Anglican Church until in secondary school when Scripture Union actually moved me a little away from the Anglican Church. And so when I finally decided I was coming back to the Anglican Church, I told God, look, okay, I'm going to the Trinity Theological Seminary. And in those days, a lot of people from the whole of Ghana will go and write the entrance exam. About at that time, maybe about 10 or 15 or 20. And Trinity College, our quota for that particular time was normally 4 people. And so if 30 people wrote, the first 4 will be taken. And then the rest will also go and write another exams at the St. Nicholas Theological Seminary, and then those who pass will be taken. And so I told God, look, I want, if you really have called me back to the Anglican Church, I want to be the first when the results come. And surely, when the results came, I was first.
Lo and behold.
And so I was very clear that God had called me back into the Anglican Church, and I gave it my all. I also told God, you know, I wanted to be a doctor. So in the Anglican Church, in the ministry that you've called me into, I want to rise in education within theology to the highest level, and to be a doctor within the church.
The church.
And I never forgot about my prayer. I was determined that this was the prayer, and so I must fulfill, the prayer will be fulfilled if I don't lose focus. And so I never lose focus in spite of the frustrations that came along the way. I went on and on and on and on until I gained, in fact, when I gained admission to go to abroad, Nottingham University. But then the theological school that I resided in and went to lectures, etc., is the St. John's College, Bramcourt, Nottingham. It was the evangelical wing of the Church of England. And so I was there, and then finished my Bachelor of Theology degree. And when I finished, I wanted to continue. In fact, I gained admission to do my master's. But then the Bishop of Accra, then Bishop Thompson, said, no, I sent you there to do a bachelor's, come back home. And so I came back home. I was sent to St. Andrew, Abosokai, and I was there for some time. Then whilst there, I was posted to Achimota School as a chaplain. Now, whilst at Achimota School, I decided, look, I'm in an educational environment now, and I'm not very far from the University of Ghana. So I will start my Master of Philosophy degree. And so I applied secretly, and then I gained admission. And I was teaching in that department with someone.
Okay.
And so some of my lectures overlapped with the lectures in the Achimota School. So what I did was my colleague decided, I will cover for you. And so I'll always pay him to cover. For me whilst I did a coursework for the MPhil. In fact, it was almost to the end that Bishop Thompson got to know that
you are doing the MPhil.
So I finished the MPhil. Before I went to do the bachelor's degree, one of my lecturers in the Trinity Theological Seminary, it was Trinity College at that time, Reverend Dr. Abuaji Mensah became the presiding bishop of the Methodist Church. He saw me one day and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm in the ACCRA Church as a chaplain." And he said, "Oh, I would like you to continue your education and come and support me at the Trinity Theological Seminary." So I told him, "Look, I can't do anything about this. You can go and see my bishop." And then what he says. So we went to see the bishop. And the bishop called me later on and said, "This is what Reverend Dr. Abuaji come to tell him." But then he was planning that I go to USA. That was the plan, etc. But because he has come to say that he will let me go to the UK. And I said, "Oh, no, if he has come to tell you he wanted me to go to UK and you have planned for me to go to the US, I'd like to go to the UK. No. Once he has come to tell me you go to the UK." And so that was how I went to the UK. And so I did my MPhil and then also started teaching. At the Trinity Theological Seminary. So when I was from Achimota School, I was also at the same time posted to the Accra Church as chaplain. So for 2 years I was a chaplain at Achimota School and then also at Accra Church. I spent about 5 years in Achimota School as a chaplain. And so it got to a time when the the Accra Church says they wanted all the supporting ministers to be full-time. And so they wrote to the bishop, and a lot of people went to see him from Church. They wanted me to come, leave Achimota School and go there. And so that was what happened. So I went to Church also for 5 years, after which I was posted to St. Stephen. Tema. But let's move away a little from the church into education. So whilst I was in St. Stephen, I was teaching at the Trinity Theological Seminary. I was also teaching at the lay ministerial school. I was also doing a lot of revivals for people and the rest. And an incident which is very important happened to me that really changed
a bit of the narrative.
Yes, me. Each time I was home at that time, I was preparing to go and do something, either to go and teach or to go to a revival or to do something somewhere. So most of the time at home, I was in my office, reading and preparing, etc. One day I was there, and then my wife knocked on my door and said she wanted to see me. So she came to sit down. I said, "Oh, sit down." And then she looked at my face and asked me if I wanted to be a monk. Why did I marry? That was all she said, and left me. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me that I have 2 Bukom boys with my wife, running around and jumping over everything, and she was the one looking after them. And I was busy looking after other people outside. And so I decided, look, it's about time that I cut a lot of the things that I was doing. Even the lay ministerial school, I went to Canon Harry Olad Mensa at that time and told him, look, I'm doing too much.
Too much.
And so I want a break from teaching in the lay ministerial school.
So you have time for family?
Before I have time for family. So I stopped a lot of things that I was doing. If you invited me to do a revival, I said there's other person.
You recommended.
So let me recommend somebody also to you. And so I spent also a lot of time with the family.
You touched on family. If I hear how education and then work came in, meaning that it was in the course of education that you got the call.
Yes.
I'll come to the sermon on go to your church and be the light.
Yeah.
How did somebody say beautiful Mother Esther come in? I see the 2 of you walk and I'd be like, this is a couple made from heaven. Virtually your smiles together. The way I see friendship. How did she come into this picture and how finally you were blessed with these 2 boys?
All right, now 4 years into my ministry as a priest, I had been ordained a priest then, and I was looking, these 4 years into ministry, I was looking for a wife.
A wife.
And it was tough because there were so many of them, so many women.
The dean is handsome, so.
Yeah, to the extent that there was a time I was internally examining myself whether there was something wrong with me. Because there were so many of them, I didn't know which one to choose. Then one day, somebody I was very close with, I was then at St. Bartholomew Teshi. I was very close with.
You're the first church you were posted to?
Yeah, that was the first church I was posted to. And I was there a long time. I told this woman, look, it's about time that I marry. She said, oh, if you want to marry now, I have somebody in mind. I said, no, I don't want these arranged marriages, etc. Let the Holy Spirit lead me to the person I want to marry. He said, no, you go and see the person. So she was talking too much. So I said, all right, I'll go and see the person. But in my mind, I wasn't going to see anybody. So I didn't go. And then 2 weeks later, she called me and asked me, have you gone to look at this lady? She then worked at Eureka Medical Lab at 7. And I said, no, I want to meet somebody myself. And then she said this on the phone. If you lose this lady, you have lost gold. And so when she said that, it intrigued me. I just wanted to go and see, okay, who is this lady at all? And so I decided to go. I went. She had been described to me at fair among all the workers there. So when you see her, you see her. So I went in and then sat down. Very busy place. And then she came out to give somebody's resource to the person. As soon as I saw her, I said, this is the one.
Behold.
This is the one. So I sat down for about 5 minutes. I was in a hurry. I went out, called this lady, and said, look, I want to meet her. She said, Nkebo, I told you, Nkebo. And so we fell in love with each other. Within 6 months, we were married.
Interesting.
There was no time to waste. Because we were in love, we were all ready, and so we went ahead and got married. And I've never regretted marrying her. Wonderful woman, full of wisdom.
Sometimes young men like myself, when we come up and then we try to find excuse of marriage, and we come across great men of God like you, what is that? May we find our life helpers. You found this woman, you are in love with her, you are settled, you've made great strides. When it comes to you, what you've been called for, man of God, did you get a helper in your ministry?
Yes, she was there always for me. In fact, she took it upon herself. There were people who could do it. She took it upon herself to iron my castles. She would iron the castles. And she would give me all the support. Anywhere I was going, she was with me and supporting me. If I was doing anything that was not correct, she was the one who was always there to reprimand me and tell me this is the way I think you must go as a priest, etc. So she had been and has been and continues to be a very strong tower for me in the ministry. She's been wonderful.
Interesting. Speaking about ministry, and back to the Bidding Paul sermon, and more of like a prophecy for it's supposed to be said, or maybe a vision that was given to the preacher, that go and become the light unto your church.
Give light to
the dry bones, like Ezekiel.
Yeah.
When you take from the very day of your ordination, that you sworn your canonical obedience to the then bishop who ordained you, up to this day, to the level you are, what can you see the ministry has been like? Have you really been the light to that dry bones that sort were there before you entered?
Yeah, because of the way I was called into the Anglican Church, my main focus was winning souls for Christ. That was my main focus. And so my sermons, etc., there was a time that I went to preach in one of the Anglican churches, and after I made altar call, etc., the priest said, "This is one of us," making the altar call. And so, by the grace of God, through my ministry in the Anglican Church, and by the way I was called and the mandate I was given, a lot of souls have been won into the Anglican Church. But you know also that in ministry, you prepare people for heaven. And so each parish that I went to, I told the people, first time I told the people, I've come to prepare you for heaven. My ministry have been wonderful. I began, as you intimated, from St. Bartholomew Anglican Church, wonderful ministry there. I took over the
very same parish you were later elected as suffragan bishop.
In fact, I was ordained a deacon when I was in that parish, St. Bartholomew. I was also ordained a priest, not from that parish, but I was there. I was ordained a priest also whilst I was there.
Bartholomew.
And then, if I fast track, 25th of September, I was also ordained, elected a bishop at St. Bartholomew.
If not so, the consecration should have been at St. Bartholomew. It's sealed. Anyway, after that.
Yeah, so after that, I went to my first parish, which was at St. Joseph Pram. When I got there, the service normally was supposed to begin at 9. They will start tickling in from 9:30, quarter to 10, thereabouts. And so I announced to the church that, look, we are going to start service at 9. Whether you're here or you are not here, I will start the service. And true to my word, when I got there, there were times that myself, my wife, and my children, I'll start the service. And then they will start coming in. There are times that if we are doing the service with only a small group, it goes very fast.
Very fast.
I finish the sermon, going to communion, and then there are plenty of them, they are walking. They said, "Oh, Eno Shane." I said, "Yes, I started the service at 9. And so it happened over about a month. And then somebody came to tell me that they were saying in town that as for this one, when they say 9, it's 9. And so they started.
No wonder you fight with him over time all the time.
They started coming right by 9. About half of the congregation were there. And I had a wonderful time there. In fact, I spent only 2 years there. It was from there that I went to England with my bachelor's. When I was leaving, unknown to me, they did a T-shirts with my picture in front, with "To God be the glory" at the back. Ayeko Father Neequaye under it, with cap, with my picture on the cap. To God be the glory and Ayeko, and they unearthed it on the day they were sending me.
Oh, beautiful.
They had actually gone for brass band. They said they wanted us to go into town to play and for everybody to see that I did very well in town. So I remember I was in red coat that time, and all over town they were wearing my T-shirt and the cap, and all over town. Brass band and jumping and singing and the rest. That was how they sent me off. In fact, when I was going abroad at the airport, they came with a trot roll. Full of trot roll.
They are always traveling.
Clothes. Came in their numbers to come and see me off. That was my first parish. My desire for the Lord is always to try and dream wherever I was sent to. And so I said to myself, these people sitting in front of me, they had done this thing over and over again. So how do you add something to it that makes it different at the same time it is Anglican? Maybe that is why some people say I don't know the liturgy.
Liturgy, yes.
But if I didn't know the liturgy, how would I know how to sing all the prefaces and length? I do all the things I had to do, etc. But the focus was that, and I always tell clergy, when you go somewhere, dream for God. Let God give you dreams that will transform the place. I remember when I went to, and it happened, but Rev'D, all over the place. Rev'D, when I went there, there was no service, youth service, and the children's service at the 6:30 service. They had to close, and then their children would go to the 10 o'clock children's service and youth service, and then they would go home.
And then when they close, they come and pick them back.
I said, no, this can't continue. And so I formed a children's service and a youth service, which has grown. Now is booming in Rev'D. Rev'D was also very busy place. The members were all over ACCRA, and we had mass on Fridays. And so when I finished mass, I had to go to so many places
for visitation.
And to give communion. So I decided that I will add a Tuesday mass also to it. So on Friday I'll go to one side of ACCRA, and then on Tuesdays I'll go to
the other side
of ACCRA. That was how the Tuesday mass.
It has come to stay now.
It has come to stay now. I did the same thing also at the Tema Joint Church. We call it a devotion. And so there was I think a Wednesday morning or something like that, we had a devotion, and it has stayed till now. And so when I was in St. Stephen, Tema, there was no morning mass. And I said, why do we have a whole church, big church like this, without a morning mass? They said most of the members go to ACCRA to work.
To go and work.
And so when you have a morning mass, it will never work. People have tried, it never worked. I said, look, if people try and never work, it doesn't mean it will not work.
At your time.
So I decided I would have a mass on Wednesdays. But then I told the congregation that we are going to have a family service. as a group, we are going to have a family service. So even though it is a mass, I didn't call it a mass. I call it
family service.
A family service. And I announced it over time, and then I began. When I began, about 200 people, 6:15 in the morning, over 200 people were...
The people that they see they go to Accra, they can't come.
Go to Accra. And it continued like that. There was a time it was raining heavily. And my assistant called me and asked me, look, in this rain, you think people will come to this mass? And I said, look, you sleep, nobody will come. Because most of the people will walk from the communities and come, and nobody will come, so just sleep. I was there in the bed, and then I heard the doorbell. I asked from the window, who is there? And then somebody told me, we are waiting for you in the church. And that was an eye-opener for me. I had to pace quickly and wear my clothes quickly, and then went there. There were over 40 people who had come through the rain.
Waiting for service.
And I apologized to them. I told them it would never happen anymore.
Indeed, you've added light to the dry bones you met. Maybe it will be appropriate I call you the Ezekiel of our time, but maybe another time we'll do that. We're going to go on a quick turn. When we come back, we'll look at your life as the Dean of Students in the very school that you started a ministry one way or the other. You went there to become a man of God. You went back again to go and teach there. You rose to the rank to become the Dean of Student Affairs and later the Vice President of the Trinity Theological Seminary. We'll look at the little impact you've made and then we'll come back to church itself. So keep tuned in, and as we go on that 10, when we come back, we have more conversation with our SUFFRAGAN Bishop-elect, the Very Reverend Dr. George Kotei Neequaye.
Behold, a great prelate.
Welcome back from the break. We're still having a conversation with the SUFFRAGAN Bishop-elect for the Anglican Diocese of Accra and the Dean of the Cathedral Church of the Most Holy Trinity, the person of the Very Reverend Dr. George Kotei Neequaye. We've seen his family life, we've seen how his ministry is going, and let's come to his academician life. He's an academician. He likes books, he likes reading, and he's a teacher. Everywhere he goes, if you hear him give sermons, you realize that this person is not only giving exhortation, but he's teaching. No wonder he's surrounded by books in his office here. Dean of Student Affairs, up to being the vice president. My friends in the seminary will say that he would have been the president of the seminary if not for the deanship. Meaning that you made an impact there too. Though people will find it to be an administrative role, but at the end of the day, we saw a Dean Neequaye element, or we saw Reverend Neequaye element there. Tell us the little impact you're able to make, and then the tweak you also introduce on the student front as dean, and then with the seminary too as vice president.
As the dean of students, you normally was interacting with the students. Their problems are brought to you, and more or less you are the link between the students and administration. And so they will come to me anytime. I remember during that period, most of the time they are knocking at my door. SRC wanted to sit down with me. They have an issue they want me to solve for them. During that period as the dean, the students were able to come to me because they felt that my doors were
open and you were listening.
And I would listen to them. I listened to them. Most of their the questions that they had or the problems that they had were solved, and so they had a lot of confidence in me. The student leadership will always come to me and discuss what they are doing, what they want to do, etc. With me. And I was also making sure that the things that they needed to know, or the people that I needed to speak to on their behalf, for instance, a lecturer was too difficult for them, and
unapproachable,
or they asked questions in class and the person said, look, you can't ask these questions, etc. They come to me and say, look, this is the problem that we are having when we want to understand things, this is what happens. And so I had to go and sit down with the lecturer concerned, and we had, between myself and the lecturers, we had excellent rapport. In fact, at that time when I was teaching, my classmates in the Trinity College, we were all there teaching. Actually, some of my classmates, Professor Asamoah Jedu was my classmate. The now Bishop of the Methodist Church,
Ghana
North,
Edusa
was also my classmate. Paul Boafo, who is now the presiding bishop of the Methodist Church, who came in and out to teach, was also my mate. Ninoi Odonko, who is the synod clerk now,
Presbyterian.
Yeah. Also came in to teach chaplaincy, etc. Was also my mate.
Wow.
And so there were a lot of people who, lecturers who were actually my mate, and I had a lot of rapport with a lot of the other lecturers. So it was very easy for me to
navigate my way through
to speak on behalf of students, etc. And so when I was moved from the deanship to the vice presidency, a lot of the students were not happy because they felt that I should have been allowed to
be there for
serve them the way I was serving them. But the vice presidency was also another ball game altogether, because you were dealing with the administrative issues of the seminary. You worked directly with the president of the seminary, and the one I worked directly with in the first instance was Professor Joseph Obiri Mante. Joy Mante, we call him. He is now the moderator of the Presbyterian Church of Ghana. I worked with him for 3 years as the vice president, and we had an excellent rapport. You are, as the vice president, you are in charge of the graduation, you are in charge of certificates, you are in charge of so many things. And so administratively, it was full. I was doing a lot on behalf of the president. And the president, even in addition to that, there's anything he wanted you to do, you call you had to do those things, etc. And then I went on a sabbatical. And then when I came back again, the door opened. The vice presidency and the presidency was done in rotation. And so by the time I came back from Emory University as a visiting
lecturer scholar,
it was a turn of the Anglican Church again to be a vice president. And so I had to walk into that office.
So you left the vice president and came in again.
I didn't want to do it because I gave all my time to it, and it affected my publication. because you need, as an academic, you need to be publishing all the time. But I gave a lot of my time to serving the institution in this particular category. And so when this position came again, I didn't want to do it. But my bishop said, look, it is not about you. It's about the Anglican Church. So you go back and be the vice president. So that's how I became the vice president again. But then I was determined this time around to combine writing with the office. And so I wrote a lot of articles. I published chapters in books. In fact, the latest one
that's good
that came out internationally is this Pelgrave handbook
on African social ethics.
African social ethics. And I contributed 3 chapters in this particular book, which worldwide. And the publishers are well known. And so, as the vice president, I decided it was about time I concentrate also this time on publishing, etc. And so, before I was appointed the dean of the cathedral, I had actually been given the senior lecturership. Senior lecturer, you move from senior lecturer
to senior lecturer,
and then to
professorship.
And so I got that position and had to move out of the Trinity Theological Seminary to be the dean.
The deanship. Interesting. Let me congratulate you on this offices you've served in, and then it's not that I've heard you were on some councils, home and abroad, and you've played your role very well. We'll be ending the chapter now, and then we'll enter into church itself and church leadership. So you come back and meet the dean fully in the cathedral, and let's see what it's been like for him, from Reverend Father Neequaye to Canon Neequaye to Venerable Neequaye to the Very Reverend Neequaye, and soon to be called the Right Reverend Neequaye. In this perspective, how the ladder has been like and how growing up has been like. But among all this, if you are to tell somebody like myself who wants to become an academic himself and maybe blend ministry, or maybe any young man of God out there who wants to maybe toe in the line of the Neequaye, what is a possible challenge they are supposed to look out for, and how can they work on it? Though we know people face individual things, but there are some challenges that I realize this one is being cut across. You've gone through it, maybe your colleagues have gone through it. What is that peculiar challenge that will come in the midst of the imbalance of being a minister and also an academic person?
Now, if in the first place, you must know that you have been called into ministry. And in the Anglican system, you are under authority. You are told where to go and you move. You don't go groaning, you go purposely to serve. And so in the first place, we are ministers. And so when you are asked to look after a church, and at the same time the church says, I want you also to go into the seminary to teach, then it is a yeoman's job. You have a very too important ministry that you must balance. So as the lecturer in the Trinity Theological Seminary, I remember when I was sent to the Trinity Theological Seminary, I was given also Anglican Church
as priest
to look after. They were then having their service in a classroom, a children classroom. In fact, the tables that people will come and sit on.
No, don't speak about the project yet. Right. We're going to speak about it later.
Yes. And so you need to to be able to balance the two. If you have been called to be a minister of a church, then concentrate on being a minister of the church, but if at the same time, the church that called you to be a minister of a particular church also wants you to be a lecturer in their institution and train people for the church, you must be able to blend the two together. You must remember that you are an academic, and at the same time you are a pastor or whatever gift you have been given. As an academic, you must learn. It means, in fact, that there are so many things that you will not be able to do. There are times I look at my friends and the things that they do. I was almost always indoors trying to prepare for a lecture, or trying to prepare for a sermon, or trying to prepare for a revival, things like that. So my life was centered around the family and also the church. But because I concentrated also a lot in the academic sphere, students most of the time want to come to my class. Most students who came to my class also told other students to come to my class because of my interaction with them and what they learned, etc. So it is very important that if you decide to be an academic person, you must also learn. You must be reading and reading and reading, and you must be buying books.
No wonder.
Pay for e-books to read on the internet, etc. You must join libraries on the internet and be able to read seriously in your area. Every lecturer has his own area, and my area is moral philosophy.
Okay.
And I teach on the Socrates and Plato and all those people, the moral aspect of their lives. And I teach also African traditional ethics.
Okay.
I also teach African philosophy. I also teach environmental ethics. Anything that has to do with ethics and morality, that is my area. And till today, I still continue to teach at the Trinity Theological Seminary, even though they have tried to reduce the load for me.
Thank you, Dean. When we come back from the break and we enter the cathedral, we'll look at the morality of men of God, Anglican priests in general, internment to your role as dean, the head of the clergy, and rising to become suffragan. How these things have been whipped, as to whether it's been correctional enough, as to whether we've been able to sieve it properly or handle it properly with some of the cases that have come over the period. And then let's see the way forward for ourselves too as a church. We write back after this quick turn, and our next turn will be in the cathedral to see the rising movement of our personality, from father to canon to archdeacon to suffragan bishop. And a lot of things have happened around him concerning the cathedral. So we need to be there. See you at the cathedral. I'll be right back.
Behold, a great prelate, who in his days was pleasing unto God.